Hello everyone, welcome to an After Effects tutorial. Today I'm going to be taking you through how I do the sports motion graphics for the sports broadcasts at BMB. You will have seen this graphic in the basketball games as well as the flag football game that we did the other day. I'm going to start by dragging in some assets that I created, or I didn't create, but I exported from Photoshop. I'll drag them into my project panel, right click, create a new folder, and I'll name it Assets. And then I'll select all of my assets and drag them into that folder. Now I'll right click, select New Composition, and I'll name it Main Comp. All of these options look good to me, so I'll click OK. Now I can open up my assets folder, select all of them, and drag them onto the timeline. Now's when you'll need to rearrange your layers so they appear in the right order. I know that I need this one on top and this one below it. The rest should be fine. Now to start with the animation, what I'm going to do is right click, select New, Null Object. A null object is basically an empty layer that stores position, scale, rotation, opacity values, all of that. You can't see it, but it stores those values so that you can link other layers to it and they'll follow it. This is really useful for things like this where you'll be having a lot of different layers having the same animation. I'll duplicate the null 3 times, so I have one for the right, left, bottom, and top. I don't need one for the center. So now I'll go into each null individually, click Enter, and give it a name. So I'll name this one right null, then I'll name this one left null, this one top null, and this one bottom null. And now I'll drag them so that they're in the right place and they each line up with their counterparts. I'm now going to select each pair and give them a label by clicking on the color and selecting what color you want them to be. Note that this doesn't serve any functional purpose other than organization. Now, we need to parent the image layers to the null layers so that they'll follow their animation. Select each layer, click the pick whip, which is this icon here, and drag it to its corresponding null layer. I'll do this for all of them. Now that we have all our layers parented, look what happens if I edit the position of any of the nulls. Notice that I'm not changing the position of the image layer, I'm changing the position of the null, and the image is following it. However, the position of the actual image layer is completely unaffected, and we can still edit that independently. Now I'll collapse that, and it's time to start on the animation. The first thing I'll do is open the top null, enable keyframes by clicking the stopwatch, and drag this keyframe out. Now I'll go into position and drag it so that it's out of the frame, which gives us this animation. It's a bit slow, so I'll drag these keyframes closer to each other. About 30 frames should be fine. The speed looks pretty good to me, but the animation looks a bit flat. I'll select both keyframes and press F9 on my keyboard, which converts them to easy ease keyframes, which basically makes the animation smoother. Now I'll repeat the process for the bottom layer, enable keyframes for position, drag this keyframe out, and move the layer down. Now select both keyframes, press F9, and there we go. I am going to make sure that these keyframes line up with each other, and I want this animation to happen after the top one. So I'm going to drag the keyframes about 10 frames over. And now it looks like that. Now I just need to do the same thing for the left and the right. However, I want both of these animations to happen at the same time. Now I'll select both the right and left null by holding Control on my keyboard and open Position by pressing P on my keyboard. Now I'll go to about where I want the animation to happen, and I'll enable keyframes for position on both layers. First I'll move the keyframes out, then I'll select the left null and move the position so that it's out of frame, and the same thing for the right one. Now I'll select both keyframes, or all 4 keyframes, and press F9, converting them to easy ease. And now here's the animation that I've created. These come in a bit too fast, so I'll drag these out a bit farther. Maybe about here. And that looks pretty good to me. Now the last part of the animation is to make this center frame thing fade in at the end. So I'll start the animation at about here. I'll select the layer, press T on my keyboard to open up opacity, enable keyframes, drag this out to about here, and set opacity to 0%. Now if I play this back, we can see that our center frame fades in after all of the other elements slide into the frame. Now I'll zoom out of the timeline, which you can do with this slider, or pressing the plus and minus keys on your keyboard. And I'll drag this end of the work area to about 10 seconds, and then I will right-click, trim comp to work area. This will just give me just a shorter timeline to work with because I don't need all of that extra space. Now it's time to start adding in text layers. To create a new text layer, activate the text tool with Control T or Command T on Mac. Click anywhere on the screen and type your text. For this one, I'll use Matt Damon. Now this is the wrong font. You can barely see it, but that's because it's in the wrong place. I'll open up the position under the text layer and put it there. Now the font that I have to use is called Jin, which I already have installed. There it is, which I can open up under the character panel. And now I just need to make it smaller, and I will reposition it some more. It should be aligned to the left, so I'll open up paragraph and do that there. And now it should be about there. I will activate basically fake italics because this font does have an italicized version. Oh well, that works too. Now I will duplicate the text layer, open up position, change paragraph align to center, and drag it down so it's in this box. I'll zoom in on the timeline by scrolling in, hold space to move around. And now I can see what I'm doing. So I'll reposition it so it's here. I'll just make this say 0, 0 so I can see where it needs to be. Maybe about there. And I need to have 2 stats per player. So I'll duplicate the layer with Command or Control D and open up position. And there are ways to make this more exact, but I'm not particularly concerned about that right now. That looks about right to me. I think maybe I'll go back into the name and move it a bit more to the left. Okay, so now this is the basis of the text. So now what I can do is hold Shift and click on the bottom and the top text layers and Control D to duplicate them. Drag these to the top, and now I have exact copies of these layers. I can open up position under all 3 and move them at the same time. I'll zoom in again just to make sure that they're about in the same place. And then I'll repeat the process. Duplicate, move to the top, position, down, and just line it up so that it's in the right place. Now I will select Fit under the zoom control, and that's what the left side of our screen is going to look like. Notice that the text does not follow the animation. Now that's where null layers become really useful, because I can select all of these text layers, grab the pick whip of any one of them, so I'll take this one and drag it to the left null. And now if you watch it back, the text layers also follow the animation of the null along with the image. While I have all of the text layers selected, I'll duplicate all of them, drag that to the top, open up position, and now I can just move these over to the other side of the frame. About there, I think should be okay. Now, the problem here is that all of these text layers are going to be linked to the left null. So I have to sort of just find where these end, which looks to be there. So from here to the top, these are all on the right. So another way to parent layers is to open this drop down and just select the layer that you want to parent them to. So I'm going to select right null, and now all of the text layers on the right should follow the null animation. Now all that's left is to add the score at the bottom. So with the text tool selected again, which is Control-T or Command-T on Mac, I will click on the screen and type in a score. Let's say it's 28. Now the font I need to use for this is called Closeness, which I also already have installed. So I can select that under the Character panel. Here's Closeness. This should not be italicized, and I can increase the font size a lot. This looks about good. And now just make sure it's centered and try to get it more or less in the right spot. I think it's a bit too big, so I'll go back under Character and decrease the font size. And now it's no longer centered, so I'll move it up. Now I'm happy with that, so I can duplicate the layer, open up Position, and move it over. And that looks about right to me. Now, these are not following any animation currently, so I need to select both of them. Under Parent, select Bottom Null, and now they'll follow the animation of the bottom layer. So this is essentially the animation done. Now all I need to do is go into the text layers and edit them all, but I don't think I need to show that in this video. So that's pretty much this done. Another thing I like to do is go to the end of the animation, maybe about 8 seconds in, and reverse the keyframes. So basically just redo the animation but in the reverse order. So I'll quickly show that. I'll go under the center because that's what needs to happen first. At 8 seconds, click this button to create a new keyframe at exactly the same value, then skip forward, maybe here, and set opacity to 0. Now at this point I can take the left and right nulls, create keyframes for those, then skip forward, drag the right one out of the frame, and drag the left one out of the frame. I want it to have a bit of overlap, so I'll go about here, select the bottom null, open up Position, create a new keyframe, skip forward about here, maybe, and I will drag it out of the frame to the bottom, and then skip a few frames back, select the top null, open up Position, new keyframe, and skip to about here, and drag it out of the frame to the top. And now, if we play through it, we can skip to the end here, and it'll go out. Now I should probably adjust the timing of this. I think this animation happens a bit slowly, and I can bring all of this in quicker. Maybe this fade out can happen more quickly. That looks pretty good to me. And then it of course cycles back to the beginning. So maybe just so you have time to pause it, I'll bring all these keyframes forward to about 7 seconds, and then if we play through the whole thing, and there's the sports stats graphic done. Yeah, see you in the next video.